The city never truly sleeps, but on this particular night, the avenues surrounding Emily Carter's luxury Manhattan apartment were more silent than usual. The kind of silence that settles before a storm. Somewhere high above the neon river of cars and the flicker of yellow taxis, Emily's life unraveled with clinical precision so quietly that nobody heard a thing. The doorman on the night shift would later recall that Emily Carter, 26, had returned home just before midnight. He remembered her kind smile, the elegant swoosh of her navy blue flight attendant's coat, the way her blonde hair seemed to catch the lobby's crystal chandelier light. She offered him a small wave and a gentle, "good night," as she had done countless times before. That would be the last time anyone saw her. When Emily's older sister, Linda Carter, arrived at her apartment the next morning, the building was already pulsing with unease. The front desk clerk's eyes darted nervously as she signed Linda in. "She hasn't come down today." "Maybe she's sleeping in," he muttered, but the concern in his voice was unmistakable. Linda rode the elevator up to the 32nd floor, clutching the coffee she'd brought for Emily, a weekend ritual since they'd both moved to New York. The corridor was pristine, but as Linda approached Emily's door, something felt wrong. It was closed, locked from the inside. She knocked gently, then louder, then pounded as panic crept in. No answer. After an hour of pleading and calls to the building's super, they finally gained entry. The apartment was a study in eerie tranquility. The door was locked. There were no signs of a struggle, no broken glass, no upended furniture. Her shoes, the ones she wore most often, were still warm by the entrance, as if Emily had just slipped them off. Her handbag was on the table, her phone charger plugged in. The only thing missing was Emily herself. Linda's eyes scanned the room for clues, her mind racing through possibilities. Had Emily gone out early? Was she staying with a friend? It didn't make sense. The coffee pot was half full. The air conditioning was set to her preferred sleeping temperature. A cup on the counter was still warm to the touch, suggesting Emily had planned to spend the night at home. There was no note, no text, nothing but the quiet hum of the city below. The New York Police Department responded with procedural efficiency. Officers in Navy uniforms dusted for prints and asked routine questions. Any history of depression, trouble at work, recent breakups? They scanned the apartment, but found no immediate evidence of foul play. Emily's passport was missing, as was her phone. Yet oddly, her jewelry, designer handbags, and other valuables were untouched. It looked more like she'd stepped out for groceries than disappeared from her own life. But Linda knew her sister. Emily would never vanish without a word, especially not before their planned brunch or without informing the airline. She wasn't the type to leave her life behind, not when she'd worked so hard to build it. Outside, the city pulsed with indifference. Cabs honked, Wall Street hummed, and socialites sipped cold brews at sidewalk cafes. Inside that immaculate apartment, Linda's world had narrowed to one cold, unyielding fact: her sister was missing, and nobody seemed to care. The investigation moved slowly, hindered by the absence of any clear evidence of a crime. The NYPD labeled Emily's case a possible voluntary disappearance, though Linda bristled at the phrase. The detectives assigned to the case, Ramos and Stevens, were polite but overworked. These things happened, they said, not unkindly, but with the practiced detachment of men who'd seen too many missing persons cases go cold. Still, Linda pressed on. She scoured Emily's social media, texted her friends and coworkers, and left desperate voicemails that all went unanswered. What she found was unsettling. In recent months, Emily's once vibrant Instagram feed, full of sunny travel photos, quirky airport selfies, and group shots with fellow flight attendants, had gone quiet. Her last post was a sunset over Central Park, captioned with a single word: perspective. It had been liked by hundreds, commented on by dozens, but none of her closest friends knew where she was. At Emily's workplace, the HR department at American National Airlines expressed concern, but offered little help. "We respect our employees' privacy," they told Linda, their eyes sliding away from hers. Colleagues were cagey, unwilling to talk. When pressed, a few mentioned seeing Emily in the crew lounge, looking distracted, maybe a little anxious. "She was different lately," one whispered, as if afraid to say more. Linda's mind spun with questions. What had happened in her sister's final hours at home? Who had she spoken to? Why did it seem like everyone around her was afraid to speak? The police examined building security footage. There was Emily entering the lobby at 11:38 p.m., wearing her uniform suitcase in hand, exchanging pleasantries with the doorman. After that, nothing. The cameras on her floor showed only an empty hallway. No one else was seen entering or leaving her apartment. The system, they said, had experienced a technical glitch between 2 hours and 4:00 a.m., a period critical to the investigation. It happens, the super shrugged, unconcerned. Sometimes the servers just go down. Linda wasn't buying it. The coincidence was too much. And as the hours stretched into days, she realized she was on her own. She poured through the apartment again, searching for anything that might have been missed. In a drawer by Emily's bed, she found a handwritten note, its corners folded and creased. The handwriting was unmistakably Emily's neat looping, always a little too careful. It read, "If anything ever happens to me, promise me you'll never stop asking questions. Some secrets are worth uncovering no matter the risk." The words sent a chill through Linda's spine. Was Emily in trouble? Had she been threatened? Who would want to harm her? And why? As word of Emily's disappearance spread, whispers began to circulate through New York's tight-knit airline community. Some said she'd been involved with a wealthy passenger. Others claimed she'd been seen arguing on the phone in the terminal days before she vanished. One friend insisted Emily had confided in her about a new relationship, a man whose family was complicated, who moved in powerful circles, who could make people disappear if he wanted to. Linda pressed for details, but the friend grew skittish, refusing to say more. The official investigation stalled. Weeks passed, and the city's relentless pace swallowed Emily's story whole. The press barely mentioned her name. The airline moved on. But Linda would not let her sister become another lost face on a missing persons poster. She hired a private investigator. She contacted every journalist she could find. She posted on every online forum, every social network, every support group for missing women. And always she returned to Emily's apartment, sitting on the cold floor by the window, watching the city lights blink in the distance, willing her sister to come home. But Emily Carter, once the shining star of her own carefully constructed world, had vanished, leaving only questions, an empty apartment, and the chilling certainty that something far more sinister lurked beneath the surface. There's an old saying in New York: "The city rewards ambition, but it punishes secrets." Emily Carter had always been ambitious. From her earliest days working minimum wage at a Newark coffee shop to her meteoric rise as a senior flight attendant at American National Airlines, she'd learned how to read people, how to smile through exhaustion, how to turn the smallest opportunity into a stepping stone. But when it came to secrets, Emily was still a novice. And this secret, this forbidden relationship, would become her undoing. It began, as dangerous things often do, with a moment of genuine connection in an artificial world. It was a routine layover in Dallas. Emily was scheduled for a private charter, a rare perk reserved for the company's most experienced crew. Her client was a group of 6 flying from New York to Dallas and then onward to Aspen for a weekend retreat. The manifest listed the Anderson family, a familiar name in the world of oil banking and American dynasties. She remembered first seeing him at the private terminal, standing apart from the others, his posture straight but not arrogant, his dark hair carefully groomed, a book in his hand. There was an old-world dignity to the way he held himself, a kind of self-possession that set him apart from the flashier, more boisterous members of his family. His name was Michael Anderson Jr., but to his friends and eventually to Emily, he was simply Michael. As the crew prepared the cabin, arranging French champagne chilled to exactly 4 degrees, and the finest caviar, Emily caught Michael glancing at her in a way that was both piercing and polite. Unlike his older brothers who swaggered and shouted orders, Michael spoke softly, his eyes rarely leaving hers. "Excuse me," he said, his voice low and resonant. "Do you speak French?" She did, and replied in perfect Parisian. He smiled, genuine, not performative. "Impressive," he said. "Most people here only speak money." Their exchanges were brief but memorable. He asked her about her background, complimented her on her professionalism, and made a joking comment about how rare it was to meet someone real at 35,000 feet. Emily, who had learned to deflect flattery, found herself unexpectedly disarmed. She remembered noticing during the flight how Michael's security details seemed less interested in protecting him and more intent on documenting everything: her name, her ID, her crew manifest. It was subtle, but her instincts, honed by years in customer service, registered the danger even as her heart fluttered with excitement. After landing, the Andersons dispersed in a flurry of black SUVs and designer luggage. Emily lingered at the terminal, decompressing after the high-wire act of serving America's royalty. As she packed her uniform, her phone vibrated with a text from an unregistered number. It read, "Coffee, M." She stared at the message, feeling a ripple of both fear and anticipation. She knew the airline's strict policies against fraternization with clients, especially high-profile ones. But curiosity gnawed at her. How did he get her number? Should she say yes? A few hours later, she found herself at a nondescript coffee shop in Lower Manhattan, the kind of place where nobody looked twice at strangers. Michael arrived alone wearing a simple gray t-shirt and jeans. He looked more like a graduate student than the heir to a multi-billion-dollar fortune. They talked for hours about everything and nothing: books, travel, the strange isolation of lives lived at cruising altitude. He told her about growing up in a family where every move was tracked, every friendship scrutinized, every ambition mapped out by people who measured loyalty in dollars and contracts. "It gets lonely sometimes," he confessed, his eyes searching hers. "I'm supposed to want all of this power, influence, legacy, but sometimes I wonder what any of it really means." Emily felt a jolt of empathy. She confessed her own doubts, the pressure of keeping up appearances, the exhaustion of endless flights, the fleeting connections that made real intimacy feel like an urban myth. When they parted that evening, Michael pressed a handwritten note into her palm. She unfolded it as he walked away. "You're the only real thing in my manufactured world." Emily's heart raced as she tucked the note away, but a shadow of unease followed her home. She wondered what it meant to be real to a man like Michael Anderson Jr. Days passed. Small gifts began appearing, a first edition of her favorite Fitzgerald novel at the airline's crew desk. Swiss chocolates delivered to her mailbox, a bouquet of wildflowers from a roadside stall, not a florist. Each gift came with a note: "Thinking of you for the next time you can't sleep. Thank you for being you." Her colleagues began to notice the change in Emily. She was happier, lighter, even more focused at work. But some of them whispered in the break room, uneasy about the attention she was getting from the Anderson heir. "Be careful," one friend cautioned. "Those families, they don't play by the same rules." Emily ignored the warnings. The thrill of new love, of being chosen by someone who could have anyone, intoxicated her. Michael was different, attentive, witty, vulnerable. With him, she could imagine a life beyond the endless cycle of red-eye flights and hotel rooms. Their relationship deepened in secret. Midnight drives through the empty streets of Manhattan rooftop, dinners overlooking Central Park. Quiet mornings spent wandering through art galleries, always careful not to draw attention. Michael never brought his security detail, insisting he felt safe with Emily, that she was the one place he could truly be himself. But shadows lingered at the edges. When Emily's college roommate Sarah planned a visit from Boston, Michael surprised Emily with an impromptu weekend trip to Miami. "Just us," he said. When her co-worker Lila invited her out for a birthday celebration, Michael frowned. "I don't trust them," he said softly. "People talk. Let's keep things private a little longer." Emily bristled, but she dismissed her doubts. She told herself he was just being protective, that this was the cost of dating someone in the public eye. Besides, Michael's affection never wavered. He quoted poetry and texts, remembered her favorite songs, even learned how she took her coffee. He told her, "You make me want to fight for something real for the first time." But even as she fell, Emily couldn't ignore the subtle shift in her life. Her work assignments changed. She was now almost always scheduled for flights to Texas or on private charters linked to Anderson Oil and Gas. She began to feel watched, as if invisible hands were guiding her life. Still, she convinced herself it was just coincidence. She wanted to believe in the fairy tale, in the possibility that love could transcend class, money, and power. As the weeks turned into months, Emily Carter was no longer just an ambitious young woman from Jersey. She was the secret heart of a dynasty, a player in a dangerous game she barely understood. One night, as she lay in bed, Emily's phone buzzed with another message from Michael. "One day I'll be able to choose you in public. Until then, trust me, I'll keep you safe." Emily stared at the ceiling, hope and dread warring inside her. She had no way of knowing that every secret has a price, and hers was about to come due. In the weeks following their late-night confession, Emily Carter's world transformed subtly at first, and then all at once. At the beginning, it felt like the natural unfolding of romance, the giddy rush of falling for someone who seemed to rewrite the rules of her reality. Yet beneath the surface, invisible threads began to tighten. drawing her ever closer to a world that sparkled with promise and bristled with danger. It started with the gifts. Michael Anderson Jr. had a talent for making every gesture seem intimate, thoughtful, almost poetic. On the surface, it was enchanting. A rare book slipped onto her nightstand, Fitzgerald Woolf, a copy of Neruda's poems, always with a handwritten note in his careful script. For when you miss me, one said, because you understand the language of longing, read another. She laughed, she blushed, she let herself believe she was special in ways the tabloids could never imagine. But the gifts grew in scale and frequency, always a little more extravagant than before. There were theater tickets delivered by courier, a signed Basquiat print she discovered in her apartment lobby, even a designer coat that seemed to appear out of thin air, her size, her style, as if Michael had memorized her entire wardrobe. The deliveries became a game, and Emily played along, texting him photos of herself, modeling the latest surprise, her laughter echoing through the empty halls of her apartment. Her friends teased her about her mystery man and wondered aloud what it would be like to date into the Anderson clan. The first real shock came on a rainy Thursday when her building's doorman handed her a thick envelope. Inside were the lease documents for a new apartment further uptown with sweeping views of Central Park and a kitchen Emily had only dreamed about. The paperwork was already signed, the rent paid 6 months in advance. Michael's name appeared only once in the fine print of a trust account that handled the payment. When she called him a little breathless, a little alarmed, he brushed it off with a practiced ease. I just want you to have a place that feels safe. He said a place of your own. Don't read too much into it, Em. For a moment she believed him. After all, what harm was there in accepting a better apartment from the man she loved? The world expected the Andersons to be generous, even extravagant. But the unease lingered, a cold thread winding around her heart. The next week, her old Toyota vanished from the building's parking garage. In its place stood a silver Mercedes coupe so pristine it sparkled even under the city's gray skies. The title was tucked into her mailbox, issued in her name, the dealership paperwork handled by a law firm she'd never heard of. When she confronted Michael, half joking, half afraid, he only smiled. You shouldn't be driving that old thing anyway. You deserve better. Emily told herself not to get used to it, but she did. The Mercedes glided through the streets, its engine a low, powerful hum, drawing stares wherever she went. She parked it next to yellow cabs and battered city vans and told herself she belonged. The money came next. She noticed it first in her checking account. Unexpected deposits, always rounded, always just enough to cover whatever new expense had arisen that month. Rent, groceries, a medical bill. When she called Michael, he was dismissive. You work too hard. I just want to help. Let me take care of you at least a little. Emily's salary from American National Airlines suddenly felt paltry, even irrelevant. She began to rely on the gifts, as Michael called them, though she never spoke of it to her friends or family. The dependence crept in so quietly, she didn't realize how much she'd changed until it was too late. But along with the gifts came invisible strings. Michael's gentle questions about her life, her friends, her routines, her work slowly became more pointed. When her college roommate Sarah made plans to visit from Boston, Michael insisted they spend the weekend in the Hamptons instead. It's the only time I have off, he said. Can't we have this time together? Emily acquiesced, canceling on Sarah with a pang of guilt. When her fellow flight attendant Lila invited her to a birthday dinner, Michael scrutinized the guest list. Who's going to be there? Are you sure it's safe? He asked, his voice soft but firm. He painted her friends as jealous, her co-workers as bad influences who couldn't understand the pressure of their relationship. Emily pushed back, but not very hard. It was easier to go along, easier to believe his concern was rooted in love. Michael's interest in her work schedule deepened. At first, he asked for her flight assignments so we can maximize our time together, he claimed. But soon his requests became demands. If she was scheduled for a route he didn't like, especially international trips or flights with layovers, her supervisor would call, apologizing for a last-minute change. Increasingly, she found herself assigned to charters for Anderson Oil and Gas, or to Texas, always close to Michael's orbit. The pattern was unmistakable. Her world was shrinking, her choices gently but relentlessly shaped by a hand she couldn't see. And then there was the surveillance. At first she brushed it off as coincidence, the same black car idling outside her new building, a security guard who seemed to shadow her at the grocery store. But when a new app appeared on her phone for her safety, Michael explained, Emily began to suspect the truth. Every step she took, every message she sent, every call she made was monitored for protection. She tried deleting the app, but it reappeared after every update. Michael's gifts kept coming, designer clothes, jewelry spa reservations, all with implicit expectations attached. The dresses were modest, the necklines high, the fabric soft and elegant. Michael praised her for dressing appropriately, for respecting his family's standards, and gently criticized her old wardrobe. Her social media presence dwindled as Michael urged her to stay private. It's for both our reputations, he insisted, and Emily, desperate to believe in the fairy tale, complied. Yet the feeling of being chosen began to curdle. The apartment that once felt like sanctuary became a gilded cage. The gifts she once cherished felt like reminders of her dependence. The world that once seemed full of possibility now narrowed to the routines Michael allowed. She told herself she still had control. She told herself she could leave at any time. But when she looked in the mirror, Emily barely recognized the woman staring back, a woman caught between gratitude and dread, freedom and captivity, love and manipulation. The real turning point came one evening when Michael took her hand, his eyes dark with seriousness. "You know I'd do anything to protect you," he said, his voice soft as velvet. "This world, it isn't safe for people like us, people who try to be different. You have to trust me, Emily. You have to let me keep you safe." Emily nodded, even as her instincts screamed. That night alone in her apartment, she opened her bank statement and stared at the latest deposit, $15,000, transferred from an offshore account in the Cayman Islands. She closed her laptop, heart pounding, and realized for the first time just how precarious her position had become. And as the city buzzed below, Emily Carter understood she was no longer just Michael Anderson Jr.'s secret love. She was a secret, a possession, a liability. And someone somewhere was keeping score. It was remarkable, really, how easily Emily Carter's world could be altered, how a single man's obsession could so thoroughly infiltrate the fabric of her daily life. By the time summer crept over Manhattan, bringing sticky nights and thunderstorms that rattled the windows of her gleaming new apartment, Emily was beginning to realize just how deep she'd allowed herself to sink. Yet she could never point to the exact moment her independence began to unravel. It was 1,000 tiny compromises, each one so subtle, so reasonable, so lovingly delivered, that she hardly noticed the cost. It started with the flight schedules. At first, Michael only asked about her next trips. "I want to know when I'll see you again." He'd say, his tone so warm that Emily couldn't help but smile. She sent him screenshots of her assignments, joked about jet lag, and reveled in his enthusiasm. But slowly the pattern shifted. Michael grew insistent. "I need your schedule for the whole month, Em. It's the only way I can plan around you," he'd say. If she hesitated, his voice would harden, just for a moment before he softened it again, with another joke, another promise. Soon Emily noticed her assignments changing. Long-haul flights she'd been looking forward to Sydney, Rome, Tokyo were abruptly canceled or swapped for Houston, Dallas, Miami. She found herself flying almost exclusively to cities where Anderson family business was headquartered or on private charters, whose passenger lists included oil executives, lawyers, and the occasional senator. Her supervisors claimed it was a coincidence, the result of last-minute crew shortages or special client requests. But Emily knew better. She'd seen the way Michael's bodyguards exchanged glances, the way the airline's CEO shook Michael's hand at a charity gala, the way her world was shrinking, closing in around her. When she tried to talk to Michael about it, he brushed her off. "It's for your own good, Emily. I don't want you flying to dangerous places. There's so much that could go wrong." He'd touch her cheek, gaze into her eyes, and the argument would dissolve. Still, a cold seed of doubt took root. Was this love or something darker? The surveillance escalated. At first, Emily told herself she was being paranoid. She noticed the same black SUV parked across from her building, the same two men in expensive suits who seemed to linger by the coffee shop. She liked the same polite doorman who always greeted her by name no matter what shift he was on. When she asked Michael, he laughed. "I just want to keep you safe. You have no idea what it's like being in the public eye. I can't take any chances." She wanted to believe him. After all, Michael was careful. He never made threats, never raised his voice, never demanded more than what he framed as concern. But her world grew smaller with each new restriction. She was no longer allowed to take the subway alone. Michael insisted on ordering her groceries, scheduling her rides, even hiring a personal assistant who seemed more interested in tracking her movements than managing her calendar. Her phone, once her lifeline to friends and family, became another tool for surveillance. New apps appeared for security. Michael explained allowing him to see her location at all times. When she tried to delete them, they reinstalled themselves the next day. Emily's friends noticed the change. Sarah, her old college roommate, called less often. "You're always busy," she complained, "or you're always with him." "What's going on?" Lila, her favorite coworker, tried to invite her out for drinks. Michael discouraged it. "Your friends don't understand us. They don't get the pressure I'm under. I just want to protect what we have." The message was clear: anyone who threatened their bubble was unwelcome. The manipulation crept in on a tide of affection. Michael praised her for being discreet, for understanding the importance of privacy. When she posted a selfie from Central Park, he called within minutes. You have to be careful with what you put online. There are people who'd love to hurt me by hurting you. Let's keep our lives between us, okay?" Her Instagram, once a vibrant mosaic of travel and laughter, went dark. She deleted dozens of old posts, blocked strangers, set everything to private. Michael was pleased, rewarding her with a weekend getaway at a Vermont ski lodge, just the two of them, and the mountain silence broken only by the wind in the pines. Yet each new freedom she relinquished left her more isolated. The security team was everywhere, their presence disguised as concern, but always watching, always reporting. Emily felt their eyes on her at the gym and the grocery store, even in the quiet sanctuary of her yoga class. Once she spotted one of Michael's men in the back row, pretending to stretch. She said nothing, but she started locking her bedroom door at night, even when she was alone. Michael's control extended to her wardrobe, her diet, even her reading. He encouraged her to dress more elegantly, to choose softer colors, to avoid anything too revealing. He sent stylists to her apartment with racks of designer clothes, all modest, all expensive, all exactly what his mother would have chosen. Her own preferences became subjects of gentle criticism. "You're better than that, Em. You deserve respect. Let's show them who you really are." She tried to resist, but resistance meant arguments, tears, and nights spent alone, while Michael cooled off in his penthouse across town. She hated the fights, hated the way they left her, feeling small and ungrateful. But the alternative was worse: the cold silence, the sense of having disappointed the one person who claimed to love her unconditionally. The psychological games intensified. Michael became unpredictable, sometimes tender and attentive, sometimes distant and irritable. If she tried to plan something with friends, he'd manufacture a security threat or claim to feel abandoned. If she questioned the changes in her schedule, he'd accuse her of being ungrateful or not trusting him enough. "Do you have any idea what I risk for you, Emily? You're everything to me. Can't you see that?" The truth was, she could see it too clearly. She saw how her world had shrunk to the size of Michael's demands. She saw the fear in her friend's eyes when she brushed off another invitation, the confusion in her mother's voice during their short, increasingly infrequent calls. She saw the way the city's endless possibilities had collapsed into a handful of approved routines, safe and sterile and suffocating. There were moments when Emily tried to break free. She'd leave her phone at home and walk the city streets alone, savoring the feeling of anonymity. She'd call Sarah from a payphone, whispering apologies and promises she knew she couldn't keep. But always Michael found out. Always there was a gentle reprimand, a new rule, another layer of protection she hadn't asked for. The worst part was the doubt. Had she invited this? Was she overreacting? After all, Michael had never hit her, never yelled, never forced her to do anything. He simply made it easier to comply than to resist. She wanted to believe in the love story, to cling to the hope that this was all a phase, that the man she'd fallen for would come back, would let her breathe again. But late at night, when the city was quiet and her apartment felt like a gilded cage, Emily Carter faced the truth: she was trapped. Trapped by love, by loyalty, by fear, and by the insidious machinery of a family whose reach seemed endless. She was losing herself piece by piece to a man who claimed to protect her, but had in fact rewritten the script of her life. Some nights she dreamed of running, of packing a bag and vanishing into the city, changing her name, starting over somewhere nobody knew her. But the security team, the money, the invisible web of influence, the whole world seemed designed to keep her exactly where she was: silent, obedient, and alone. As summer bled into autumn, Emily Carter stared out over the city that once promised everything. Now the skyline looked like a wall. And somewhere in the shadows, Michael Anderson Jr. was always watching, always waiting, always ready to remind her just how easily ambition could become a prison. Autumn arrived in New York with its familiar sharpness, the crisp air tinged with wood smoke, the sidewalks alive with a swirl of golden leaves, and the ceaseless hum of ambition. For Emily Carter, though, there was no relief in the change of seasons. By now, the velvet trap Michael Anderson Jr. had woven around her felt inescapable. Her world had shrunk to a handful of familiar faces, carefully vetted places, and the low, persistent hum of anxiety in her chest. But she still held on to a stubborn hope that one day Michael would make their love public, that she'd step into the light as his equal, not his secret. She had no idea how deeply her presence was already disrupting the world above hers, a world of men who dealt in billions, traded favors in back rooms, and built their empires on unbreakable codes of secrecy and loyalty. It started as so many reckonings do with routine surveillance. Emily had always known Michael's family was powerful, but she'd underestimated just how much of their life was built on scrutiny and control. Michael's father, John Anderson, was a titan of American industry and oil baron whose fortune powered more than half the lights in Texas, a philanthropist lauded in glossy magazines, and a patriarch who brooked no dissent. John Anderson's days were scheduled down to the minute morning conference calls with international investors, charity luncheons with senators, evenings spent brokering deals that would shape American energy for decades. Yet despite all his obligations, he made time for the one ritual he trusted above all, the daily security briefing. Every morning at 7:00 a.m., the Anderson family's private security chief delivered a thick envelope containing reports on each family member, where they had been, whom they'd seen, what risks might be lurking in the shadows. It was during one of these briefings just after Labor Day that John Anderson learned of Emily Carter. Her name first appeared in a list of non-family contacts, then in a grainy black and white photo captured by a hidden camera outside a discreet wine bar in the West Village. Michael and Emily heads bowed close together, her hand on his arm. There were other images too, Emily entering Michael's penthouse late at night, the pair slipping into a chauffeured car, a security team tailing them at a distance. John's face betrayed nothing as he flipped through the photos, but inside a cold anger built. It wasn't just the secrecy that bothered him, it was the risk. The Anderson family operated at the intersection of money and power, where scandals could topple empires and enemies waited for the smallest sign of weakness. Michael was the youngest, the most promising, and the most reckless. A public affair with a flight attendant, no matter how accomplished or charming, could jeopardize everything. Worse, John Anderson was in the midst of finalizing a deal that would define his legacy, a merger with a Saudi oil conglomerate brokered through a marriage alliance between Michael and the daughter of a Saudi prince. Billions were on the line, not just in oil, but in influence in future contracts and global standing. For months, John had orchestrated the arrangement like a chess grandmaster, moving pieces no one else could see. Now all of it was at risk because of a woman. That afternoon, Michael was summoned to his father's office, a wood-paneled sanctuary filled with hunting trophies, heavy leather chairs, and the subtle scent of aged bourbon. John sat behind a desk carved from Texas oak, his hands folded, his gaze implacable. Michael tried to play it cool, but the tension in the room was suffocating. "Dad, you wanted to see me?" "Sit down, Michael," John said, voice calm but cold. For a long moment, John said nothing, just slid the envelope across the desk. Michael looked at the photos, his face flushing with embarrassment and fear. He tried to protest, but his father cut him off. "You think you're the first Anderson man to fall for a beautiful girl?" John's tone was almost pitying. "We don't have the luxury of mistakes. Not with the family name, not with this deal. I have spent decades building something you could never imagine sacrificing, and I won't have it destroyed by your indiscretion." Michael's jaw clenched. "Dad, it's not like that. Emily isn't. She's not some fling. I care about her." John's expression hardened. "You're going to end it. Tonight. No explanations, no exceptions. You end it, or you end your life as an Anderson. I'll cut you off from the trust. You'll be written out of every deal, every will. Do you understand me?" The words landed like blows. Michael stared at his father, searching for any sign of mercy. There was none. For the rest of the day, Michael wandered Manhattan in a fog, his mind racing, his heart pounding. He thought of all the times he'd dreamed of rebelling against the family, of forging his own path. But this was different. The threat wasn't just about money. It was about erasure exile, the loss of everything he'd ever known. That night, as the city glowed with the cold light of autumn, Michael called Emily. He asked her to meet him on the rooftop of the Met, their old spot overlooking Central Park and the towers of Midtown. Emily arrived wrapped in a wool coat, her face anxious but hopeful. The city's skyline stretched out beneath them, a sea of lights and possibility. For a moment, Michael just stared at her, memorizing her face, the way her hair danced in the breeze. "I have to tell you something," he said, voice trembling. Emily's breath caught. "What's wrong?" He told her everything about his father, about the arranged marriage, about the billions at stake, about the photographs and the ultimatum. "I can't do this anymore, Em. I want to. God, I want to. But I don't know how." Emily felt the world tilt beneath her feet. Part of her had always feared this moment, but she clung to the fantasy that love would be enough. Now the truth was unbearable. "So that's it," she said, her voice brittle. "After everything, you just walk away." "I'm not walking away. I want you to come with me. Let's leave. Tonight. We can disappear. I have money, we could go anywhere." Emily shook her head, tears streaking her cheeks. "I won't be your secret anymore, Michael. If I'm not enough for you to claim in the daylight, then I'm nothing more than a convenient escape." Michael tried to take her hand, but she pulled away. "This isn't love," she whispered. "This is fear. I can't live like this." He begged her, pleaded, promised to fight, to change, to find a way. But Emily stood her ground. For the first time in months, she felt her voice return, sharp, strong, unbreakable. "If you can't choose me, then you're not the man I thought you were," she said, and turned away, leaving him alone on the rooftop, the city humming below. As Emily disappeared into the night, neither of them saw the man watching from the shadows, a figure in a dark suit, phone in hand, already reporting back to the Anderson patriarch. The machine had been set in motion. And for Emily Carter, the stakes were no longer just love or heartbreak. They were survival. In the weeks following that devastating rooftop meeting, Emily Carter was no longer the woman who had quietly yielded to invisible chains. Something had snapped inside her, something essential born of heartbreak and hard-won clarity. If she was to lose everything, she would do so on her own terms. At first, the change was small, a single night spent alone in her apartment, not waiting for Michael's call. She let her phone ring out, unplugged her tracking apps, and stared out at the city, as if daring it to swallow her whole. She slept for the first time in months, truly slept without fear of surveillance or a sudden knock at the door. But defiance in her world came with consequences. The next day, as she walked to her favorite corner cafe, she noticed the car, a nondescript black sedan, windows tinted, parked just across the street. At first, she convinced herself it was coincidence. But when she changed direction and ducked into a pharmacy, the sedan moved too, gliding slowly, always keeping her in view. She felt the old familiar chill. Even her rebellion was being watched. Her phone buzzed. Michael's name flashed on the screen. She didn't answer. He called again, then again. Each call, each unanswered plea seemed to fuel his desperation. Then came the gifts, now stripped of romance and reeking of apology. Flowers, blood-red roses arrived at her door. Designer handbags, each with a note begging forgiveness. A diamond bracelet hidden in her mailbox, glinting under the harsh fluorescent light. She returned everything. She left the flowers at the concierge desk, the handbags on the steps outside her building, the bracelet in the trash. She blocked Michael's number, deleted his emails, erased every trace of him from her social media. That same day, she called Sarah, her college roommate, for the first time in months. "I need you," Emily said, voice shaking. "I've made a mess. I need my friends." Sarah didn't hesitate. She showed up that evening with takeout wine and the fierce loyalty of someone who'd seen Emily through heartbreak before. They sat on the couch, eating noodles out of cartons, talking late into the night. For the first time in a year, Emily felt human again, tired, afraid, but alive. But Michael's reach extended beyond gifts and calls. That weekend, she noticed her schedule at the airline had shifted. Instead of her usual New York to London run, she was suddenly reassigned to domestic-only routes, all short haul, none outside Michael's sphere of influence. She called HR, but got only apologies and vague explanations. She checked her bank account. The mysterious deposits were gone, replaced by unexplained charges, a subtle reminder of how quickly her financial world could be destabilized. Then one night, as she and Sarah walked home from a movie, the black sedan reappeared, crawling along the curb. Sarah stared it down, but Emily's blood ran cold. "Are you sure you're safe?" Sarah whispered. Emily hesitated, then shook her head. "No, but I'm done being afraid." The next day, she bought a cheap burner phone. She called her mother in Ohio using a payphone just to be safe. She told her mother everything: the affair, the threats, the manipulation. Her mother wept. "Come home, Em, we'll protect you." But Emily knew there was no going home, not yet. Instead, she started documenting everything. She wrote down the license plate numbers of the cars that followed her, took pictures of the men she saw in her building lobby. She kept a detailed log of every strange call, every odd email, every interaction with airline supervisors or doormen who seemed too nervous, too rehearsed. She made encrypted calls to a friend of Sarah's, a tech-savvy lawyer who specialized in digital privacy. Together, they began building a file, saving it to secure cloud servers outside the country. "If anything happens to me," Emily said, "make sure people see this. Don't let them erase me." As the days passed, Michael's attempts at contact turned frantic. He began showing up at her building sometimes at 2 or 3 in the morning, pounding on her door. The doorman, now on Michael's payroll, let him up without question. Emily would sit in silence, heart pounding, as his voice echoed through the hallway. "Em, please, just talk to me. I love you. I can't lose you." Once she opened the door a crack, just enough to see his face wild and haggard. "You're not well," she said. "You need help." He knelt in the hallway, tears streaming down his cheeks. "If I lose you, I lose everything." She shut the door. She called building security. Nothing changed. The pressure campaign escalated. Anonymous warnings arrived at her airline supervisor's desk, hinting at Emily's questionable associations. Subtle threats surfaced in her visa status. The head of HR called her in, voice trembling. "We're under pressure to review your position, Emily. There are concerns." She realized with mounting horror that she was being squeezed from every direction. Lose her job, lose her apartment, lose her safety net, and Michael would still be there watching, waiting, insisting that only he could keep her safe. But Emily refused to back down. She started reaching out to journalists, quietly, anonymously. She contacted women's advocacy groups, international human rights lawyers, anyone who might be able to shine a light on her situation. Most doors closed in her face, but a few left the latch open. She learned she was not the only one, that powerful families in America, just as in other countries, had a long, ugly history of making inconvenient women vanish. Through it all, Emily clung to her sense of self. She started running again early in the morning along the East River, the sky just starting to pale with dawn. She wore no headphones, never took the same route twice, always checking her shadow. She told herself that as long as she kept moving, kept fighting, she could survive. The final ultimatum came in the form of a letter, thick cream-colored, with the Anderson family seal pressed into the wax. Inside, in cold, precise handwriting, was the message: "You have 1 week to leave New York. If you remain, you will find that this city is no longer a safe home. You have been warned." Emily read the letter 3 times, her hands trembling, then placed it on the pile of evidence she was collecting. She took a photo, sent it to her lawyer friend, and locked it away. That night, as the city howled with wind and rain, Emily stood at her window staring down at the blur of headlights on the avenue. She felt fear, yes, but beneath it a simmering anger, and something even stronger, resolve. They could take her job, her home, her safety, but they could not take her voice. Not unless they silenced her for good. As thunder rolled over Manhattan, Emily Carter made herself a promise. "If I go down, I'm going down fighting." And somewhere in a suite on the upper floor of a skyscraper, Michael Anderson Jr. listened to the storm and realized, perhaps for the first time, that he was losing control. The next move would not be his to make. 2 days before the Andersons' lavish engagement announcement would appear in every major American newspaper, Emily Carter stood in her kitchen, still wearing her Navy airline uniform. The night outside was restless. Rain battered the city, thunder echoing off glass towers as if warning that something terrible was about to happen. Emily's flight from London had landed just hours earlier. She should have been exhausted, but her nerves buzzed with the certainty that a storm far worse than the weather was about to break inside her own walls. She'd sensed the mounting pressure all week. Michael's messages had grown more desperate, more volatile, pleading one moment, threatening the next. The black sedan was a permanent fixture beneath her window, its headlights blinking on whenever she moved past the glass. She'd heard footsteps outside her door late at night, muffled voices, the hush of expensive shoes on marble tile. The doorman barely met her gaze anymore. Her supervisor at the airline stopped replying to emails. Tonight, Emily's apartment felt like a trap. She double-checked the deadbolt, poured herself a glass of water, and sat on the couch, her heart racing as she scrolled through news of the Anderson engagement every headline a countdown to her erasure. She forced herself to breathe deeply. She had her escape bag, packed her burner phone, charged her folder of evidence, uploaded to secure servers. She would not be taken by surprise. The buzzer sounded at 11:32 p.m. Emily froze. She pressed the intercom. Michael's voice, shaky, urgent, came through the speaker. "Em, please. I need to talk to you. Just one last time. Please." She hesitated, every instinct screaming at her to refuse. But she needed closure, a final answer. If she could see the defeat in his eyes, maybe she could finally let go. She buzzed him up. Michael's appearance startled her. Gone was the suave, controlled heir to a fortune. He was pale, unshaven, hands shaking as he clutched the kitchen counter. His eyes darted around the room as if expecting someone to emerge from the shadows. He didn't sit. He paced, fingers raking through his hair. "Em, they know everything," he whispered. "My father, the whole board. You have to come with me. We leave tonight. Canada, Mexico, anywhere. Please, before it's too late." His voice cracked. "They're serious. My father, he said if I don't go through with the marriage, I lose everything. But if I defy him, if you stay, they'll... God, I don't even know what they'll do." Emily stared at him, finally seeing the truth in his desperation. Not just a man in love, but a man who had never been forced to choose between love and legacy. "If you wanted to protect me, you would have chosen me long ago," she said quietly. "You can't save me, Michael. You can't even save yourself." His face crumpled, anger and anguish twisting together. "Just wait. Give me time. I'll fix this, I swear." But Emily shook her head. "I won't be hidden. I'd rather disappear on my own terms than live in the shadows of your father's empire." Their voices rose, bitter words ricocheting across marble and glass. Accusations, regrets, love, warped by too many secrets. Emily finally snapped. "If you want to erase me, do it yourself, but I will not go quietly." A noise in the hallway, heavy footsteps, muffled radios. Michael's face turned ashen. Oh God, he sent them. Before Emily could react, the door burst open. Three men entered, moving with the cold precision of professional suits, crisp expressions, blank. Michael was shoved aside, his protests silenced by a firm grip to his shoulder. "Mr. Anderson, you need to leave," one said coldly. "Your father's orders." Michael struggled, but he was escorted out, his pleas fading down the hallway. Now it was just Emily and the men in the apartment. She backed away, heart thundering, every muscle tense. "You have no right," she hissed, but the leader simply shook his head. "You were warned, Ms. Carter. There are consequences for crossing the family." She fought. She screamed. She hurled a lamp, a chair, anything within reach. The men closed in, clinical, unemotional. One pinned her arms, another pressed a cloth to her face. The room tilted. Darkness crashed down. She drifted in and out, glimpsed flashes of motion, hands rifling through her belongings, the men speaking into earpieces. She heard, as if through water, the lead man's steady voice, package secured. Commence protocol. Footsteps, the heavy drag of something across the floor. Cold air as she was lifted, shrouded in something rough and unfamiliar. When Emily next opened her eyes, she was outside, rain spattering her face. City lights spinning overhead. She was placed into a nondescript van, the kind that could vanish into New York's river of traffic without a trace. Her phone and passport were gone. Her shoes were missing, left by the apartment door still faintly warm. She tried to scream, but her voice barely made a sound. The van door slammed, the engine started, and she was whisked away into the darkness. Back at her apartment, the men moved quickly, erasing any sign of violence. Shoes by the door, a half-drunk glass of water, the bed neatly made. They reset the air conditioning, took care to leave valuables untouched, planted subtle clues of a hasty departure. Security cameras in the building glitched their feeds, corrupted the crucial 2-hour window wiped clean. By sunrise, nothing remained but a puzzle, an apartment empty, but undisturbed, a locked door, warm shoes, and silence. The building super noticed something was wrong when Emily didn't answer, repeated knocks about a noise complaint. When the police arrived, they found no forced entry, no sign of struggle, just a missing woman, an open suitcase, and a city that didn't seem to care. The police labeled it a voluntary disappearance. Emily Carter was filed away as another adult who chose to leave. The case, lacking evidence of a crime, slipped quietly into the background noise of New York's endless tragedies. But Linda Carter, Emily's sister, refused to accept it. When she flew in from Ohio, she found the apartment exactly as Emily had described in their last conversation, immaculate but wrong. Warm shoes, a coffee cup still faintly hot, the air set for sleep. She found the folder of evidence Emily had hidden and realized with chilling clarity her sister hadn't run. She'd been erased. Linda's fight was just beginning. She had no idea how deep the Anderson family's influence reached or how dangerous the quest for truth would become. Meanwhile, somewhere far beyond the city, Emily Carter's fate was sealed. She was lost to the world. Her voice silenced her evidence, scattered her existence reduced to rumors, theories, and a single unfinished promise. If I go down, I'm going down fighting.